mindfully. um, in your time, can you describe what Earth looks like from your vantage point?
Equating our time frame to your timeline, you will find that even though there are villages and cities per se, they're not built up in the same way that they are now. There are far fewer places that are built up. Many of them are far more like villages. There is a lot more forestation and greenery on your planet. Certain ecosystems have returned and are thriving. The idea, therefore, is that now, by our time, many of you have gone off planet to explore other worlds. You have colonized other planets that have been laid aside for you to do so. So the Earth, in that sense, has been allowed to relax a little bit more into its natural state, even though there is still much activity on your planet, still many high-level technological achievements. None of them anymore are polluting, and they allow for the natural growth to occur on your planet, and also for the shifting of humanity, and also, of course, the arrival and interaction with many different extraterrestrial species.
And our relation to the cetaceans in the ocean and the condition of our oceans?
They are thriving.
And humans respect, at that point, humans respect cetaceans as another sentient life form?
Absolutely. Now, again, please remember, this is not the world you are on. This is the version of Earth that you will be shifting to if you continue to navigate your consciousness in that direction by following the formula and making positive choices, because that version of Earth already exists and is a version that is far more representative of the idea of contact in a way that we can interact with, because it's far closer to our vibrational frequency. So the idea, again, is it's not the Earth you're on now.
So at the same time as that Earth is communicating with you, other Earths would be in other forms of chaos or disarray.
Yes, of course. Every possible conceivable variation of Earth is already ongoing right now.
Right.
So it's just about the idea of navigating to the one that is more compatible vibrationally with the idea that I have just described.
Yeah, it really is empowering to recognize that by changing yourself, you're able to interact with another level of Earth or be on a different Earth in a sense.
Well, no, it's not in a sense at all. Because the idea is that that's what you're doing right now to create the idea of the side effect called time. You're going through billions of parallel reality versions of Earth right now every second. It's not like it is.
So the fact that we have such free will at this stage in our development to choose a dark path or a positive path, but the ultimate effect of that will be experienced by each person because they'll see it reflected in the Earth that they are inhabiting.
Yes, of course. Because again, you can't experience what you're not the vibration of, and conversely, you will only experience what you are the vibration of. So there is an Earth for every vibration.
So I'm assuming that the younger people that are taking this journey would have a greater opportunity to experience a much more advanced Earth once, over the span of their lifetime, say, versus someone who was born in the 50s or 60s and who are at a different stage in their life process.
Well, yes, in general, although again, there's always exceptions no matter when you're born. It just depends upon your modality of perception and thinking and what you choose to buy into as a belief system. So yes, you might say the younger generations have been given more options because of the evolutions in thought that have happened on your planet. It may seem more probable and more likely for them to choose things that will lead to those versions of Earth. It doesn't mean that someone born earlier can't, but we understand what you mean by that.
Is there a connection between pandemics and massive change as almost like a precursor to?
Yes.
massive change?
Yes, there is. Because again, massive change in the collective can bring up all sorts of fear-based issues in the collective, and those fear-based issues can play out in physical reality in a way that then allows you to deal with the consequences of those fear-based issues and release them so that you can allow yourself to transform collectively more easily. But it has been a common precursor to massive change in many of your societies that you will first cause some form of either disease or catastrophe that represents the letting go and the releasing of the fear-based beliefs. But it's not that you have to do it that way. It's simply been the way you have done it because you haven't known any other way to, shall we say, face those things except by bringing them into your reality in a way where you're forced to face those things and deal with them.
So the people who transition during a pandemic, would those individuals then have chosen not to make the change and that they preferred to either, well, do something different, let's just say?
Well, that can be the case for some of them, and it's not about not necessarily having preferred to make the change. It may simply be that they didn't have the tools to understand they had that option.
Because that's one thing that happens in a pandemic, as with war. Now, is the same thing true of war, that it also is a precursor?
It can be. It can be. Again, you cannot necessarily always generalize these things. You have to look at the different individuals and groups within it and what it is they are choosing relative to those ideas that are expressed by a collective or at least a group within the collective. So yes, it can represent those kinds of shifts about to occur by the playing out of all the fear-based ideas beforehand so that you can be done with them, let them go, get over them. But again, remember that if they keep occurring, you haven't really dealt with the causational beliefs within yourselves.
So in a way, it's almost like it's a negative tool that can be used in a positive way, but because the earth, in a sense, is still steeped in a lot of negativity, we may still choose mechanisms for transition that are negative in a sense.
Yes, because again, it forces you to face certain things. So in a sense, it's kind of like you paint yourself into a corner and are forced to face certain issues.
Now, as far as our connection with the Sirius civilization,
Yes.
can you share for us on Earth right now, what kind of relationship do we have with the Sirius beings, and who in particular are we in contact with?
You are in contact with the beings, the physical version of the civilization known as the Nomos. The relationship between you is one of guidance, mentorship, and education. For they brought to your world all sorts of information and tutelage and mentorship on a variety of subjects, like agriculture, mathematics, architecture, so on and so forth. So it's kind of literally like a mentorship relationship that you have with the amphibious culture that comes from the star system of Sirius.
And as far as the dolphins and the whales, are they interacting with the same level of consciousness as we are, or perhaps something different?
Well, they're interacting with the physiological species as well as the non-physical consciousness on a higher level of sixth density that is also associated with the Sirius star system.
Thank you.
Yes.
You also previously made a prediction about the Eastern Bloc, I guess, and a change.
Yes.
Is there anything you want to mention about that?
You are seeing some of the variables of that playing out now in what is going on in your Middle East with regard to the idea of Palestine and Israel setting up certain conditions that, depending upon what choices they make, can spread and radiate and ripple outward to either positive or negative effect.
There's been a lot of questions about Sasquatch.
Yes.
Can you talk to us a little bit about their existence, perhaps their civilization, their art forms, anything else you can share about them?
Well, as we have said, they are the natural evolved hominid of the earth. If certain branches hadn't been altered genetically by the Anunnaki, you would all be Sasquatch today. But the Sasquatch, being very close to nature, have learned many of the different ideas of how nature operates. It's one of the reasons why they can peer into other dimensions and actually shift into other dimensions to make themselves relatively elusive. In some sense, many Sasquatch now consider, or still consider, Homo sapiens to be aliens, since they contain alien genetics that the Sasquatch don't contain. It's one of the reasons why, to some degree, they still avoid you. So the idea is, again, they are willing to open up certain kinds of dialogue in certain kinds of formats and forums, but you have to sort of look at them as a more indigenous culture, very, very closely bonded with nature, because they understand themselves as nature. And therefore, they have developed many forms of communicational languages that are all nature-based. They can very easily speak to many other kinds of animals and also plants in a variety of ways. And this is the way their culture is based. It's based on different formats of communication and experience in nature and in other dimensional expressions of nature. So art form, in a sense, although this is a very loose term with regard to the idea of Sasquatch, can be the way in which different forms of communication are expressed between different dimensions of nature, different expressions of nature in their cultures. You could say that a very close representation of the idea that you might be somewhat familiar with would be that their entire culture is shamanistic and capable of interdimensional interaction and interactive interspecies exchange with a variety of species, not only in your reality, but in other dimensions as well.
Like, how would we perceive them in versus a chimpanzee? In
You would
terms of
perceive
their
them.
development, their way of communicating with each other, do they still have remnants of primate behavior?
Well, to some degree, but again, in a much more natural way. The idea is that you would simply recognize them as an intelligent hominid.
So we would still see them as human and distinctly different from animals in
Yes.
terms of their language.
Let me put it to you this way. When you understand more about the idea of cetaceans, you will see the Sasquatch similarly to the difference you see between a cetacean and a fish.
Yes, because we notice a certain kind of democracy in cetacean organization.
Well, and sentiency and communication. They have language, and so do the Sasquatch. You will see them as a sentient civilization on their own terms. And the idea is that you don't see them as human, you will understand them as, well, I don't necessarily think they would necessarily appreciate being called humanoid, but the idea is that you will see them as their own evolutionary path of a sentient expression on Earth.
Okay.